Ratios, part 3. Separating a total. To solve any ratio problem, simply apply I supposed to amend this, the 5-step process. Not 4 steps we established is a 5, we brought it up. We upgraded it to a 5-step process. So this had to be upgraded. If you look at the orders we did before, the last session, if you look at it, 5-step process. So this one did not get the upgrade, but we'll apply it now. To separate a quantity into 2 ratios, into 2 parts. Okay, you want to separate a quantity into parts. Quantity into parts. For example, you have $1,000 and you want to separate it into 2 parts, 2 to 3. How can this be done? There are different ways of doing it, and we are going to apply it here, the 5-step process. The first step in the 5-step process is your labeling ratio. Your labeling ratio must be words or letters. The labeling ratio, when you separate in a quantity, is quantity and parts. Quantity and parts. Okay, so the labeling ratio is quantity and parts. So bear that in mind. When you separate in a quantity into different parts, the labeling ratio is quantity and parts. So the first step is your quantity to parts. For example, quantity and PRT. You can put QANT for quant, because you don't have to be a complete word. Quant and parts. Okay, that's the labeling ratio. Now, because we're separating in quantity and parts, one of the ways of doing that is to find your total ratio. The total ratio is an important value to obtain. The total ratio. The total ratio here for this example is 2 plus 3, which is equal to 5. So that's the total ratio. Or total parts. So here now, we can replace the word ratio with parts, the total parts. So now we have the total quantity, which is 1,000, and we have the total parts. We can make a ratio with that, because the next ratio now must be, it must have 2 numbers. The next ratio must have 2 numbers. Now we have to follow the labeling. So on the quantity, we can put 1,000. Now 1,000 now is a quantity. It's actually the total quantity. So total quantity must be associated to total parts. So that's why obtaining the calculation of the total parts is important, because you have to associate it to the total quantity. So quantity on the quantity, parts on the parts. Total quantity, total parts. The next ratio now must have a number and a letter. A number and a letter. You go to the information. You want to know how much the part 2 going to have, or the part 3. So, and you hear what I said, the part of 3. So when we put the colon, the 3 have to come on the parts. And remember what we said, this ratio must be a letter and a quantity, because now we want to find the quantity for the part of 3. So you can use the letter X. This ratio must have quantity and parts. X and a number. So step number 1, labeling ratio. Step number 2, a ratio with 2 numbers. Step number 3, a ratio with a letter and a number. But a prior, for this particular situation, a prior step is to find the total parts. Now the 4th step now is to make sure that everything is aligned. Quantity on the quantity, parts on the parts. That has been achieved. So step number 5 now is cross multiply and divide. So now we're going to find the quantity for the part of 3. Now the rule is that you always divide by the number diagonally away from the letter. So you see X and you see 5, we have to divide by 5. We have to divide by 5. So it's not just cross multiply, it's cross multiply and divide. So we're going to have X is equal to, you put a division sign, and under the division sign, we have to put 5. And above 5 now, we're going to put 1,000 times 3, or 3 times 1,000. 1,000 times 3 is 3,000, divided by 5. 5 into 30 goes 6, and you have 2 zeros. So the part of 3 is going to obtain $600. And you can clearly calculate the part of 2. You simply subtract 600 from 1,000, or you can repeat that same cross multiply and divide using X and 2. So we can call this X1 just to differentiate. These are 2 different X's. And this is X2, we're going to do now, that's X1. Oh, let's call that X3. The part of 3, the quantity for the part of 3, and we're going to find the quantity for the part of 2. So we're still going to cross multiply and divide. X2, we're going to divide by 5 also. So basically, what we're going to be happening there is X2, the part for 2, is 1,000 times 2 divided by 5. You have 2,000. 5 into 20 equals $400. So the whole idea is when you're separating a quantity into parts, find the total parts. Then start your 5-step process. Label. The labeling for this is always quantity and parts. Whenever they tell you to separate a quantity into different parts, the labeling is quantity and parts. You have the total quantity, you have the total parts. And then your order ratio, a letter and a number. The number there is parts, the letter is quantity you're finding, and always divide by the number that is diagonally away from the letter, which is 5. You cross multiply and divide and find the quantity related to that part.